I sat in my truck outside her bar, watching the neon sign flicker above the entrance. The street was nearly empty, just a few late-night drunks stumbling home and the occasional car passing through. It was almost 3 a.m. She should have been out an hour ago. I checked my phone again, no texts, no missed calls. Just silence. This wasn't the first time. The first time was a fluke. The second, a coincidence. The third? That's when patterns start forming. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just waited, because deep down I already knew. 15 minutes later, the door finally swung open, and there she was, laughing as she stepped outside. But she wasn't alone. A man followed her, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who walked like the world owed him something. He was wearing a leather jacket, hands stuffed casually in his pockets. He said something, and she threw her head back, laughing like he was the funniest man alive. I felt something sharp lodge itself in my chest. I watched as they stood close, too close. Her hand brushed his arm. His fingers ghosted over her lower back. Then she turned, and for a moment I thought she was coming my way. But no. She walked straight past my truck, down the sidewalk, towards the corner where his car was parked. A black Dodge Charger. Tinted windows. He opened the passenger door for her, and she slid in without hesitation. I sat there, watching as the car pulled away. And then I started driving. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I followed them, keeping my distance. Block after block, they weaved through the city streets until they reached an apartment complex. They parked. She got out first. He followed. They walked inside together. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Just sat there, staring at the building, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight my hands ached. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. She never came back out. I don't remember driving home. I just remember the static in my head, the way my body felt disconnected from my mind, like I was moving on autopilot. The house was dark when I stepped inside. Our house. The place we built together. The place she was supposed to be sleeping in tonight. I sat on the couch, staring at the clock on the wall. For 12 a.m. My phone was still silent. No calls. No messages. I could have called her. Could have asked where she was, let her lie to me again. But I didn't want her to know I knew. Not yet. At 7 a.m. the front door finally creaked open. I heard the soft shuffle of her footsteps as she walked inside. She didn't even try to be quiet, didn't even bother sneaking in like someone who felt guilty. I stayed perfectly still as she walked past the living room straight to the bedroom. A minute later I heard the shower turn on. I got up and followed. I stood in the doorway watching steam curl out from the bathroom as the water ran. Then I looked down. Her shoes. The same heels she'd worn last night, now kicked carelessly to the side. One was scuffed. The other had a small smear of dirt on the heel. And next to them a man's hoodie. Not mine. Not anything I had ever seen her wear before. Something in my chest burned. I stepped inside the bathroom. The mirror was fogged up, the sound of running water drowning out everything else. Through the glass of the shower I could see the shape of her body. Relaxed. At ease. Like nothing had happened. I leaned against the sink and spoke. Good night. The figure behind the glass froze. A second later, the water shut off. The door creaked open and she poked her head out, blinking at me with wide, startled eyes. Oh my God, she laughed, pressing a hand to her chest. You scared the hell out of me. I didn't smile. Didn't move. Just looked at her. Her damp hair clung to her shoulders, and for the first time I noticed something small on her collarbone. A faint smudge. Not soap. Not shampoo. A bruise. A fingerprint-shaped bruise. I felt my heartbeat in my skull. Where were you? I asked, voice steady. She blinked. What? Last night. You never came home. She scoffed and reached for a towel, wrapping it around herself as she stepped out of the shower. I told you I had to stay late at the bar. Some guy wouldn't leave and I had to deal with it. Then my mom needed me for something. My phone died, and I crashed at her place. Jesus. Why are you interrogating me at 7 in the morning? Lies. Smooth. Practiced. I stared at her. Then I bent down and picked up the hoodie. Held it up. Her face didn't change. Not right away. But I saw it, the flicker of something in her eyes. Something calculating. She shrugged. That's mine. Really? Yeah. I bought it last week. Then why does it smell like men's cologne? She rolled her eyes and snatched it from my hands. Oh my God. Jake. Do you ever stop? My mom's boyfriend gave it to me last night because I was cold. Are you happy now? Calm. Effortless. A lie built on top of another lie. I took a step closer. She didn't flinch. Didn't falter. She just stared at me, daring me to call her bluff. I exhaled slowly. Then I smiled. Yeah, I said. I believe you. Her shoulders relaxed. She tossed the hoodie onto the counter, stepping past me. Good, because this little jealousy act is getting old. She walked out of the bathroom, the conversation already forgotten. I stood there for a long time, staring at the hoodie, knowing exactly what I was going to do next. That day, I played the part of the trusting husband. I kissed her goodbye before she left for work, told her I'd see her later, and watched as she walked out the door like she hadn't spent the night in another man's bed. Then I got to work. I wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or scream accusations. That's what she expected. That's what cheaters wanted, for you to lose your temper, to act irrationally, to turn into the crazy husband they could blame for their actions. No, I wasn't giving her that out. I started with her phone. Not by going through it, she was too careful for that. But I did check her phone bill. And there it was. The same number. Over and over. Calls. Texts. At all hours of the day and night. I dialed it. It rang. Once. Twice. Then a voice answered. Yo, babe, what's up? I didn't say anything. There was silence on the other end. Then, hello? I hung up. Now I had a voice. Now I had a confirmation. I spent the rest of the day setting things in motion. I called a buddy of mine, Nick, who worked in private security. Told him I needed a favor. By that evening, I had everything I needed: access to cameras near the bar, records of her movements, even photos of her getting into that black Charger with her little boyfriend. And that's how I learned his name. Tyler Mason. 34. Used to be a semi-pro fighter before getting banned from competitions for some incident that never made it to the papers. Yeah? Just a lowlife who spent most of his time drinking, picking fights, and apparently screwing married women. That night, I didn't say a word to her. I let her talk about her day like nothing was wrong. Let her kiss my cheek. Let her climb into bed beside me, scrolling through her phone like she wasn't sending texts to another man. I stared at the ceiling. Silent. Waiting. Because I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I was ready. Not until I could make her pay. The next few days, I played my role perfectly. I was the same husband I had always been, attentive, patient, predictable. I kissed her before work. I asked about her day. I even surprised her with coffee one morning before she left. She smiled, thanked me, told me I was sweet. Then she walked right out the door to meet him. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. Nick was already on it. By the end of the week, I had everything. Photos, timestamps, locations. Every lie she had told me, every excuse, every fake argument she had picked just to get out of the house. It was all laid out in front of me. Tyler Mason. Her little secret. I knew where he lived, where he worked. Hell, I even knew where he liked to grab coffee in the mornings. And that's where I decided to introduce myself. It was a quiet Wednesday. I left the house right after she did. Told her I had a long day ahead and wouldn't be home for dinner. She barely looked up from her phone when she said, "Okay. Love you." A habit. A reflex. A meaningless phrase. By the time she was sitting at some diner across town, giggling into her coffee while Tyler whispered in her ear, I was already at his gym. I walked inside like I belonged there. A few guys were working out, a couple of trainers shouting directions. And then, near the back, I spotted him. Tyler. He was hitting a heavy bag, shirtless, tattoos covering his arms and chest. I took my time walking over. When I got close enough, I spoke. "You hit like a bitch." He stopped mid-swing. Turned. His eyes flicked over me, assessing. He had the look of a man who'd been in 100 fights and won most of them. He sized me up and smirked. "You talking to me?" I tilted my head. "I don't see anyone else here embarrassing themselves." His jaw tensed. "You got a problem, man?" I stepped closer. Just enough for him to feel it. My problem, I said slowly, is that you've been screwing my wife. Silence. A few guys nearby stopped what they were doing, watching. Tyler blinked, then let out a low chuckle. Damn. That's tough, bro. But that's not my fault. I didn't move. Didn't react. Just stared at him. He smirked again. Listen, man. Maybe you should ask yourself why she needed someone else. Maybe you weren't giving her what she wanted. I nodded slowly. Then I swung. It wasn't a wild punch. It wasn't reckless. It was fast, precise, and it landed right where I wanted his jaw. The impact sent him stumbling back. Someone shouted. He wiped his mouth, looked at the blood on his hand, and smiled. Then he lunged. I barely had time to brace before he was on me. Tyler Mason fought like a man who enjoyed hurting people. It wasn't just about winning. It was about breaking whoever was in front of him. His punches came fast, brutal, all muscle and aggression. I dodged the first one, blocked the second, but the third caught me right in the ribs. Pain exploded through my side. But I didn't go down. I wasn't here to fight fair. I drove my knee into his gut, cutting off whatever cocky remark he was about to make. He grunted, staggered back, but he wasn't finished. Not even close. We circled each other, breathing hard. A crowd had gathered, but no one stepped in. Not yet. Not bad, he muttered, rolling his shoulders. Guess she likes her men with a little fight in them. Something in me snapped. I lunged, but that was exactly what he wanted. He dodged, countered, and the next thing I knew, his fist connected with my temple. My vision blurred. The gym lights spun. Then impact. The floor. Hard. Cold. I barely registered the voices, the movement around me. Tyler leaned over me, grinning. Stay down, he said. She's not worth dying over, man. I should have let go. Should have accepted it and walked away. But as I lay there, tasting blood, one thought cut through the haze of pain. He didn't just screw my wife. He thought he won. I forced myself up, but before I could move, I felt hands on me. The gym owner, some guys from the crowd pulling me back, dragging me away. Someone was talking, saying something about calling an ambulance. And Tyler? He just stood there, wiping blood from his knuckles. You come at me again, he said, I won't stop next time. Then he walked out. I don't remember much after that. The world spun, everything tilted, then darkness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My head felt like it had been split open. My ribs ached like hell. Machines beeped somewhere to my left. And then her voice. Oh my God, Jake. I turned my head slow and stiff. And there she was. My wife. Sitting beside my bed, wide-eyed, face filled with concern. You got into a fight? She asked, voice trembling. What were you thinking? I stared at her. She reached for my hand. Baby, you scared me. I thought. I pulled my hand away. Her mouth snapped shut. For the first time, I saw something beneath the performance. Something flickering in her expression. Guilt? No. Fear. Not of losing me. Of what I knew. I swallowed the taste of blood in my mouth and spoke, voice hoarse. If I make it through this, I told her, you'll pay for it. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, but before she could say a word, I closed my eyes. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. When I woke up again, she was gone. The room was dim, the only light coming from the small TV mounted in the corner, playing some daytime talk show I didn't recognize. My body felt like it had been put through a meat grinder, but my mind was clearer than ever. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. A nurse came in, checked my vitals, told me I had a mild concussion, some bruised ribs, and that I'd be discharged the next day. I barely listened. I was already planning my next move. Emily had been here. She had put on the act. But she hadn't stayed. And I knew exactly where she had gone. I reached for my phone. One missed call from Nick. A text, call me when you're up. I did. Jesus, man, Nick answered immediately. You okay? I'm fine, I said. Tell me you got something. Oh, I got plenty. You're not gonna like it though. I already didn't like it. Tell me. There was a pause, then Nick sighed. Your wife? She went straight to him. I closed my eyes. Of course, she did. Nick kept talking. I've got footage of her showing up at his place about an hour after you got dropped at the hospital. She stayed for 2 hours, then left. But here's the kicker, she wasn't crying. She wasn't upset. She was smiling. I exhaled slowly. So, what's the plan? Nick asked. I opened my eyes. looked around the hospital room. Then I smiled. We burned their world to the ground. The moment I got discharged, I got to work. Step 1. Secure my money. Emily and I had a joint account, but I had my own private savings. That morning, I moved every damn cent out of our shared account into mine. I left just enough to keep the lights on, wouldn't want her getting suspicious yet. Step 2. Start the paperwork. I called a lawyer. I didn't want a divorce, I wanted a scorched earth divorce. No mediation. No settlement. No, let's be civil. I wanted her walking away with nothing. Step 3. Take what she loves most. Emily didn't care about me. That much was clear. But you know what she did care about? Her family's business. The bar she managed belonged to her parents, but what she didn't know was that her father had been looking to sell for months. Business had been rough and he was tired. He just wanted out. I made him an offer. A very good offer. I could see the guilt in his eyes when we met, like he felt bad for taking my money when he had to know what his daughter was doing. But I didn't care. By the end of the meeting, the paperwork was signed. I didn't own part of the bar. I owned all of it. Step 4. Let her think she's won. I went home that night, acted sore but defeated. Emily played the concerned wife, asked if I needed anything, offered to make me dinner. I let her. I let her pretend. Let her believe she was in control. But the moment she went to bed, I grabbed my keys and drove to Nick's place. It was time for the final step. The one that would ruin them both. Nick was waiting for me when I got to his place, leaning against his kitchen counter with a folder in one hand and a beer in the other. "You sure you want to see this?" he asked, tapping the folder against his palm. "It's bad, man." I took the beer, cracked it open, and took a slow sip. "Show me." Nick sighed and tossed the folder onto the table. "All right, you asked for it." I flipped it open, and there it was. Photos, text logs, a full map of her betrayal. Monday night. She told me she was working late. Instead, she was at a hotel with him. Wednesday afternoon. She went to lunch with her mom. She was at his gym watching him train. Friday night. She was having a girls' night. She was in his car, parked in a secluded lot. Photo after photo. Lie after lie. And then I stopped. One particular photo caught my eye. It wasn't at a hotel or in a car. It wasn't at his gym or outside the bar. It was in my house. My blood turned to ice. The picture was time-stamped from 3 weeks ago, taken through my own living room window. Emily. Tyler. On my couch. Nick must have seen my face because he let out a low whistle. Yeah, that one pissed me off too. I closed the folder. Took another sip of beer. Then I smiled. "They think they've won," I murmured. "They have no idea what's coming." Nick grinned. "Now that is what I like to hear." I played my part perfectly. Over the next few days, I was the same old Jake. A little quieter, maybe. A little more distant. But no fights. No accusations. Emily ate it up. She started coming home later. Stopped pretending she wasn't lying to my face. And that's when I set the final trap. Friday night, I told her I was heading out of town for work, an emergency on one of the job sites. "I'll be gone all weekend," I told her. "Probably won't have great service, so don't wait up." She kissed my cheek. "Stay safe." I almost laughed. Because the moment I drove off, she texted him. And I know this because I had Nick watching. "She's heading to your place." Nick told me over the phone. "Good," I said. "Everything set?" "All set. Just say the word." I drove to a motel on the other side of town, checked in and waited. For hours later, Nick called again. "She just got there," he said. "And you're not gonna believe what she brought with her." I frowned. "What?" "A duffel bag. Full of clothes." I went still. "She's not just screwing him," Nick said. "She's moving in." And that's when I knew. She thought I was never coming back. I let out a slow breath. Then I smiled. "Perfect," I said. "Let's finish this." The next morning, while my wife was waking up in another man's bed, I walked into her family's bar, my bar now. The place was quiet, just a few staff getting ready for the day. I had already sent out an email earlier that week, letting them know there was a new owner. I told them nothing would change yet, that everything would continue as usual. That was a lie. I wasn't here to run a bar. I was here to make a point. Emily's dad, Rick, was sitting in his usual spot near the back, sipping coffee and reading the paper. When he saw me, his face tightened. "Jake," he nodded, setting down his mug. "Didn't expect you in today." I sat across from him. "Yeah. Wanted to talk in person." He exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw. "Listen, son, I just want to say I don't need an apology, Rick." My voice was calm. Too calm. "I need you to tell Emily she's fired." He blinked. "What? You heard me. She's done." Rick ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, I know things between you two." "She cheated," I said flatly. "For months. I have proof. And now she's shacked up with some guy who put me in the hospital." Rick looked genuinely shaken. "Jesus, Jake, I interrupted. Don't pretend you didn't know. I don't care if you feel bad. I don't care about her. I own this bar now, and the first thing I'm doing is getting rid of her." Rick let out a long breath, then nodded. "All right, I'll tell her." "Good." I stood up. "Oh, and one more thing." Rick raised an eyebrow. "When she comes storming in here later, which she will, make sure the security cameras are rolling." I smiled. I want a keepsake of this moment. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. Nick's voice was pure amusement. "She's pissed. Just got to the bar, and man, I wish you were here to see this." I grinned. "Record everything." "You got it." Then I hung up and drove straight to Tyler's apartment. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I used the spare key Emily thought I didn't know she had copied, and I walked right in. The place was a mess: empty beer bottles, dirty laundry, a half-eaten pizza on the counter. I could hear the shower running in the bathroom. And there, by the door, was her duffel bag. I picked it up, unzipped it. Inside, a handful of her clothes, some makeup, a framed wedding photo of us. I actually laughed at that. Then I walked into the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife from the block, and slashed every single piece of clothing in that bag. Shirt after shirt, dress after dress. I didn't rush. I took my time. By the time I was done, the shower had turned off. I stepped back, took one last look at the shredded fabric, then calmly walked out the door, locking it behind me. Let them wonder. Let them panic. I wasn't finished yet. I didn't go far. I parked down the street, out of sight, and waited. It didn't take long. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Emily." I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. By the 4th time, I answered. I didn't say anything. Just let her speak first. "Jake," she hissed, her voice shaking, not with sadness, not with regret, but rage. "What the hell did you do?" I leaned back in my seat, watching the entrance of the apartment complex. "What do you mean? You were here. You went through my stuff." She cut herself off, taking a breath. "What is wrong with you?" I chuckled. "You really want me to answer that?" Silence. Then, low and furious, "You're pathetic." There it was. The real Emily. Not the sweet wife. Not the apologetic woman. This. I smiled. "You're fired, by the way." Another pause. Then, confused. "What?" "From the bar," I clarified. "You don't work there anymore. Turns out your dad was tired of your crap too. And since I own it now, well?" I shrugged, even though she couldn't see. "You don't have a job anymore." A sharp inhale. "You bought the bar?" "That's right." She stopped, struggling for words. "You did this to punish me?" I hummed. "No, I did it because I can." Then I hung up. I let her scream into the empty line. I wasn't done yet. There was still Tyler. I knew exactly how to break him. Emily loved playing the reckless, bad girl routine, but deep down, she needed stability. She needed comfort. And Tyler? Tyler was about to lose everything. Nick had already dug up enough dirt to sink him. The guy had debts. Gambling problems. A couple of unpaid loans to some very unfriendly people. And now, thanks to some well-placed calls and a favor or two, those people were about to start knocking on his door. By the end of the night, Tyler Mason wouldn't have a car, wouldn't have a gym, and wouldn't have a single dollar to his name. I had spent years building a life for Emily. Now I was going to watch her rot in the ruins of it. 2 years later, the first time I saw her again, she was behind the bar. My bar. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy wiping down the counter, taking orders, putting on the same fake smile she used to wear when she pretended to love me. But now it wasn't for tips. It was because she had to. She was stuck here. No house. No car. No savings. She had nowhere else to go and no one left to turn to. She was mine now in a way she never expected. I leaned on the counter. Whiskey. Neat. Her head snapped up. And there it was. Shock. Rage. Fear. I smiled. Long time no see, babe. Emily's hands curled into fists. Get out. I laughed. I own this place, remember? That means you work for me. Her nostrils flared. She hated that. Hated every second of it. And I loved every second of that. She set my drink down, slamming the glass harder than necessary. I swirled the whiskey, watching her. How's Tyler? Her jaw clenched. I already knew the answer. He was gone. Broke. Homeless. The last I heard, he was sleeping in his car. Well, was sleeping in his car until that got repossessed, too. Emily had picked a sinking ship, and when it went down, she went with it. You ruined my life, she whispered. I took a slow sip of my drink. No, sweetheart. I set the glass down, leaning in close. You did that all by yourself. She turned pale, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. And that's when I knew. She finally understood. I stood up, tossing a few bills on the counter. Not for her, but for the show. Keep the change, I said, walking toward the door. Then, right before I stepped out, I turned back. She was still standing there, breathing hard, shaking with rage and humiliation. I smiled. See you at work tomorrow. And then I walked away, leaving her trapped in the wreckage of the life she thought she stole from me.